Well, hello, friends. How are you doing? It is Thursday, February 25th, 2021. This is Front Center Mezzanine. I am, of course, Maxwell Haddad, and I am joined by my illustrious co-host, the namesake of the network himself, Mr. PJ Campbell. How are you this evening, PJ?
I'm doing well, man. I can't believe we're already almost into March in 2021 considering last March felt like it went for an entire year and now we're already back to that
Yes,
time again. I don't know, man.
we are perilously close to the 1 year mark for when this all started, which is surreal and hard to fathom intellectually and emotionally. But
100%.
this is our 13th episode of Front Center Mezzanine and our 204th or 205th overall episode of stuff we've done on the Pajukin since launching last year. So we just keep cranking it out. And speaking of cranking it out, before we get to our incredible guest, and believe me, when I say incredible, I mean it,
Yes,
we have some stuff coming up. If you've been watching some of our other shows the past few days, you may know that we have a bit of a light week ahead because we need a break. But first of all, tomorrow night we are doing a watch along of Stardust. This was voted on by our incredible patrons. This film is available on Netflix. Sorry, Brandy, I know you don't like it. Oops, blame the other patrons who voted for it. Then, of course, Saturday afternoon, 12 Pacific, 3 Eastern, is our water cooler chat, where we will be breaking down episode 8 of WandaVision, which airs tonight at midnight Pacific. It is the penultimate episode of this series of television. I think it's going to be quite exciting. Are you going to be there, PJ?
I will be there. I will
Awesome.
definitely be there because how can I not be? I had
Well,
this
you weren't last week, so you never know.
work related, but we're good now.
I understand.
No, I know, but this week we good.
Awesome. So that'll be Saturday. Then Sunday, we are not doing an unwind. There will be no unwind this Sunday. However, for our patrons out there, sometime in the next few days, we will be doing our monthly patron AMA. Be sure to check the patron page. We're going to put up a poll with a couple options to see what works for you. And speaking of patrons, we do have a Patreon. Check it out and see if there's a tier that's right for you. As you know, we just released episode 6 of Box, but the patrons got it early. Our $5 and up patrons get the blooper show for Box called Bloop Bloop. And on and on and on. And I have to give a special shout out to all of our incredible patrons, our executive producers, Brandy Parker, Brandon Buckingham, and Ricardo Franco, our gold producer, Sean Wingblade, and all of our amazing producers, Mike Kay, Stephen White, Kale, the youth critic, Bedore, Jake Berlin, Anton Putra, Tyler Birch, Patricia Correa, Chris Pokernoy, She-Raw Potato, the lovely Molly Damon, and our newest patron, Beth Harris, who is Kristen's mom. Oh, and I am remiss because we actually have another patron who I didn't add in, and that is Ferris Muthana. Welcome
Ferris.
back aboard, Ferris. I promise you will be added to the credits before our next show. Couple other notes. As I said, it's a light week next week. We are taking Monday and Friday off. We will be doing no watch-alongs. This will be the first time since launching the channel that there will be no watch-alongs this week. I think we deserve it, but Tuesday night is episode 2 of Book Nook, hosted by myself and Dwayne Burke. The book is Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. I recognize that this is the February episode that we're doing on March 2nd. However, if February was a normal length month, March 2nd would still be February, so deal with it. Anything else you want to talk about real quick before we bring on our guest?
No, I mean, I think that one thing we do have to talk about a little bit though is we do have a 1 year anniversary coming up. Mike K brought it up. I think we're gonna have to do something about that. Just a thought. I don't know what yet, but we'll do something.
I think we should do something that involves copious amounts of inebriation, silliness, and nonsense, which is par for the course.
Yeah, so pretty much what we do here all the time, mixed with a little bit of the fun. Maybe it'll be a 9-hour Q&A, not behind a paywall. Who knows? We've done that before.
I mean, on election night,
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
We went for 9 hours.
Yeah.
And our audience just grew, so who knows? But we will definitely have some fun. I just want to take this second to make one other note on a personal / slightly selfish level, but not in the interest of being selfish, but in the interest of helping to spread awareness. If you follow me on Twitter or Instagram, you probably know that I was very, very fortunate to get the first dose of the COVID-19 vaccine earlier this week. I know that it's been difficult to get appointments. I know that there's been mixed messaging. But if you've watched our content, you know that we have always firmly been in the stay safe, wear your mask, social distance, make smart choices camp, and much in the same interest. As vaccines become increasingly available, as your eligibility shifts based on whatever you may have going on, you know, be on top of it. Do what you can to get yourself an appointment. Because the sooner we can all do that, the sooner we can start to slowly creep back towards some semblance of normalcy, which I am hoping includes the return of live theater, which is why we're here, because of our undying love for live theater.
So, you know what that means also? Wear your
What?
goddamn masks.
Yeah, just because you get
Just
the
wear your
vaccine doesn't
mask.
mean you should stop wearing your mask. Masks
Wear your
are
masks. We want to get through this shit.
good. That's enough of our political soapbox. We'll see where this may go once we bring in our guest. And on that note, I have been a fan of this actress for a long time. She doesn't know this, but I was at the first Broadway preview of American Idiot. I saw that show over a dozen times because I lived in Hell's Kitchen,
Her
2
face
blocks
right now,
away.
she's so shocked, and I
And
love it.
if I had nothing to do, I would go enter the lotto, and I just kept winning. So I've been spit on by that cast. I have Melissa Etheridge's guitar pick that she gave me after she played St. Jimmy. And then on throughout everything. I saw her in Spider-Man. Baby It's You, I saw. One of the few people, with all due respect, that show was very short-lived. I saw Holler If You Hear Me, and of course got to work together with her on Broadway Bounty Hunter, which our viewers know all about because we basically had the entire cast, crew, and company of that.
And don't forget SpongeBob, man. Who forgets the SpongeBob
I mean,
Squarepants
look,
Musical? Come on.
No, I mean, I definitely saw her in SpongeBob. I was at the closing night performance of SpongeBob,
I know.
which was a very emotional evening. That speech Tina gave at the end.
I was there not very long before that because I
Yeah.
caught it that January before, so I was there too. So, you know.
Yeah. Anyways, without further ado, presenting Christina Sajous.
Wow. Well, first off, what an intro.
We love a good intro on this channel.
That is awesome. First
And
off,
it's all true.
that is awesome. But thank you for first off supporting theater and the value that you've been doing it, and not only being like a viewer, but also being behind the table as well. Like, thank you so much.
Oh no, thank you. I mean, you and have brought me great joy over the years in your work, and what I love doing about this show, especially since everything has been shut down, is like in my own small way, keeping the love of theater alive and getting to talk to people. We've had, like I said, so many people from Broadway Bounty Hunter on. We had Joe and Jen and Allison. We had Alan H. Green on and L. Nathan. And then we've had other people like Heath Saunders and Gerard Canonico. So it's just been a blast to hear all these different perspectives from producers to writers to actors. But I think actors might be the most fun to talk to because you guys traverse the most areas. You end up working on a lot more shows than, say, a composer might, and you have audition stories. But before we get started, how are you doing? It's been such a strange, tumultuous time.
Yes, I have to say I'm pretty good considering that, things have been, the whole world is kind of turned upside down. But I have to say that I think I've been taking advantage of the opportunity of a lot of rest and finding what my new creative voice is, because right now we don't have theater, but there is still film and television. And so understanding what my voice and what my attention is to that, and something that I've always wanted to do. So it's really nice to kind of shift focus a little bit and see if that's part of my niche or something I can do. And it's been really fun, I have to say. Considering everything that's been going on, it's been a very devastating time. But I've been trying to take advantage of the good times. And if we are not looking at the good, then we're really kind of losing an opportunity to find peace. And I have to say, at the end of the day, I'm a happy woman.
That's good. I appreciate that because I've talked to a lot of people, including my therapist, about this, and know there is no shame in seeing a therapist.
Yes.
I like ending the stigma on mental health awareness, but although you can recognize the devastation, the loss, the pain that the last year has brought, it's also okay to recognize and admit when there's been personal growth or positive change has happened for you. And I think anyone who's been able to find a new creative outlet or take the time to like reflect inwards and discover something new about themselves is kind of a beautiful thing amidst all this pain and suffering.
It's so true. I mean, there's so much to learn. And I mean, we've been also given the space to learn new things. And honestly, I always say that it is a missed opportunity if you're not learning something new about yourself. I love that you mentioned therapy. For the first time in my life, it's something that I've actually thought about and considered, and although I haven't quite participated in therapy, I think one of the things I've learned this year was like, oh, I think I kind of might struggle with anxiety, and because you work so much and you put all your goals and your life into your craft, and you forget to sometimes take a moment to just pause and look inside yourself to really know what's going on. And I have to say, for the first time, I can actually admit, like, I think I might experience anxiety because you put your energy in so many different places. And so it's easy to kind of like not acknowledge it or not even notice that it exists. When you're about to go on stage and you're like, ooh, I have this nervous energy or this like, this ball in my gut. You're like, what is that feeling? And then you go on stage and then you forget about it. But that's anxiety. And so it's something that I'm kind of learning now about myself. And I'm learning how to cater to it, pay attention to it, give it, nurture it, and learn how to live with it in a healthy, in a very healthy way.
I think that's awesome. And I appreciate you being so open about it because from my experience, talking about it and sharing is like, I don't know, half, but is a part of the battle, being aware of what's going on, not being afraid of admitting it. And if you need help, seek it. And if, it's just something that being aware of it is the help that you needed, that's great. So I think that's really special.
I think sometimes it's hard for artists to kind of admit where we need to seek help in certain areas in our lives when it comes to mental health.
Especially because so much of the best art comes out of the pain and depression.
Exactly. But during a time like this, because there's not much of that, we have to learn how to be a little bit more stable because we are looking in the mirror every single day and kind of reevaluating who we are during this pandemic. And we don't have art really on a consistent basis to hide behind that mask. And the thing that we're addressing every single day is us on our very raw, dry form. There are no wigs, there are no costumes, and there is no makeup. And so it's like kind of rediscovering who you are as you are evolving to the next level in your life.
Yeah, and if there are wigs and costumes, no one else is seeing them.
No one else is seeing them. But as I'm moving around, I was like, oh, I think I did a project, and it's like, I'm like, what?
Your chair is very sparkly.
Yes, because I have a green chair, and I realized it's reflecting off of there was one of those screen drop things. It's reflecting off of my green chair. So
that's amazing.
That's awesome. I was trying to figure out what's going on, and I was just going with it because it's pretty.
This is technology. See, I don't even know how to get rid of this. So it's supposed to be a bar because I did a presentation.
Oh, it is. I can see it now.
I can see the bottles now. Yep.
So weird. So I was like, this chair's sparkling, but it's literally.
Well, at first I thought it was just a sequined chair, and every time you sort of adjusted, I was like, I need that chair. It's so beautiful.
But that explains why my face feels kind of like, oh, is it like melting away? Because like there is a backdrop. So my apologies. Ignore it.
No, it's great. So we've touched in a little bit about how you're doing now. So if you will, let's hop in a time machine and traverse your youth. I'm always curious, you've been performing for a long time. I know you went to Tisch, and we'll get to that. So I would have to imagine that, acting, performing, musical theater was something you honed in on early. Was there an influence in childhood, or did you come to it a little later on?
Well, I would say that musical theater wasn't always the primary focus for me. I always say I'm kind of an artist first, and then I kind of like see things as a director. And what's interesting is that I just came off a conversation just talking about a project I possibly will be directing this summer. But I would say I've always been an actor first. I've never actually looked at musical theater as a separate entity, because even when you get a piece of music, I always look at it as an actor, and I just look at the circumstances, the context, the content of what I'm singing about. But I have to say I've been involved or interested or in love with the arts ever since I was little. I can say that I can track it as far as when I was 3 years old. I used to watch Little Shop of Horrors. And once again, not really seeing it as a musical theater piece, but seeing it as an amazing piece of performance art that was on television. And my mother would tell me that I would stand right in front of the television and pop in the cassette tape and watch it over and over and over again, literally until I fell asleep. And I would play all the characters while I was watching it. And she said that because I was so busy doing that, she was like, I think I should get this girl involved in the arts. So when I was like 5 or 6, I started taking classes at Lee Strasberg School of Acting in New York City, because I'm from New York.
Oh, okay.
And so in the Lee Strasberg School, I believe was like near 14th Street, like Union Square area at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to those classes. I also went to Harlem School of the Arts. So I took like ballet, theater, acting at that time. Went to LaGuardia High School.
Oh, you did? Wow.
Yeah. So everything is.
So you were in it.
I was in it. This has been a life investment. Like, this is my life. This is all that I really truly know and understand. And it's like one of those things. It's like you choose it, but then because you work, which is a blessing, you discover that it chooses you as well. But I have to say, this has been a lifelong journey.
That's awesome. And by the way, you're definitely barking up the right tree with Little Shop, because PJ and I both love it and would both, I think, make hearty arguments that it's one of the single greatest musicals ever written. I mean, Alan Menken's a genius. I'm sure you've seen the movie, but have you seen the like the alternate ending of the movie where it's the actual dark ending that it should be?
Yes,
That's the way it should be.
So good.
Yeah,
it was so weird, because I remember the first time I saw the movie, I was like, why is it ending like this? Even when I was younger, because I knew, and I was like, this feels wrong. Like, something about this isn't right. And so then years later, when DVD became a thing and they started finding the footage and putting it out there, I was like, it was there the whole time. You guys screwed it up, and I don't understand.
It totally makes sense in that way, in that alternate ending. And one thing, I actually saw that when I was older as well, because I was like, there's a DVD set and it has all these alternate endings, because that was back in the day where they were just playing on a TV.
On TV, yeah.
And if you're so lucky, you're like, I'm going to pop in my cassette tape and I'm going to press record and catch it. And so I would watch that same video, and you can see all the lines kind of scratching through it, and like all the distortion of like.
Yeah, and if you see it on stage, the ending is super dark.
So dark.
So
I actually did that production years ago, and I played Audrey, and I was so shocked of how different. Well, not different, but slightly the ending, especially, was in the musical versus the movement.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So I'm so curious about LaGuardia, because I sort of feel like, my mind almost immediately goes to Fame. It sort of has this like larger than life mystery behind it. And I'm trying to think if I've ever actually talked to someone who went there, and I'm not sure if I have.
Here I am.
So I guess, was there an audition process to have to get in?
Yes, absolutely. So LaGuardia High School is considered one of the specialized high schools in New York City. So you have Stuyvesant High School, Bronx Science, Brooklyn Tech, and LaGuardia. And for all schools, you actually have to do specialized tests for. However, for LaGuardia, you just had to audition. That was considered the specialized test.
Sure.
And so for that particular school, I was totally committed, because in junior high school, I went to a science school, but craved to be artistic. And so I was totally prepared for LaGuardia, because I was also involved in like after school programs with Harlem School of the Arts. I was still involved with Lee Strasberg every and so like I was, if I didn't get into LaGuardia, I didn't know where I was going to go. Like it only made sense to me. And I think it was the only high school I actually auditioned for. I was that confident, but also that certain that I had to get in. But I auditioned for the dance department, which I don't know why I did that. Because they're competitive dancers. And because I can move doesn't mean that I'm a professional dancer.
Sure.
Head into the dance program. But I believe I did for vocal and for drama, but I chose the drama department because I just think that for me, that just spoke more true to my experience, what I actually really wanted to do.
What was the balance like while there between, regular math, science, English, etc., and performing arts classes?
I have to say LaGuardia is fantastic because it really does prepare you not only for the real world, but also for college because it treats its institution like a conservatory. And so, I mean, I wear a lot of black clothing because that was my uniform. I went to school and for the drama department, all of us wore black. It was
They tend to do that.
Yeah, we all wore black because we had to be like vessels who were just there and non-colorful and just prepared and ready. And they treated us as players. And so, yeah, I mean, a typical day in school would be, I would be in drama from 8 a.m. until maybe 12. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
12. Oh, wow. So we were there all day long. I mean, mostly during the day. And then we would have lunch. And then the rest of the afternoon would be dedicated to our liberal arts, science, math, social studies programs, English. And so, and they were very strict in those particular classes because it was important to LaGuardia that if you were not going to be an artist, that you were skilled in other things. So they took our math and science very seriously. I mean, I have to say, with all honesty, a lot of kids struggled having to do both because both the conservatory and both the liberal arts programs were so strict. And a lot of people would be left behind just because if you could not get your liberal arts classes, you would not accelerate to the next level. So it was very competitive.
I totally get that. It's not exactly the same thing, but I went to film school for college. And all any of us wanted to do was make films and learn about Hitchcock and do cinema studies. And then when it was time to do math or science, which you have to do, we sort of like begrudgingly groaned our way through it just to do the least amount of work possible so then we could get back on set and make movies. So I'm sure it's even more difficult when you're 15, 16, 17, and you're just, still figuring yourself out. Wow, that sounds challenging, but like
it was really
amazing.
Hard. Yeah, and then after we had, depending on what your grades were, I believe that if you were in a freshman and sophomore, drama was in the beginning of the day, and then your liberal arts classes were in the afternoon. And then when you got older, it was actually the reverse, I believe. So I believe all of your liberal arts classes were in the morning from junior to senior year, and then your drama classes were in the evening. But it didn't just stop there. We also had rehearsals. We had productions, we had like scene studies. And so like we were like in drama from 8 to 12 p.m. You had your liberal arts and then you still had to go back to drama in the evening to rehearse for something. So I always say that I think LaGuardia is a great institution for people who really want to take their craft seriously. And it really does prepare you for college because I feel like college is exactly the same thing.
Yeah, it sounds a lot like my college experience and not at all like my high school experience.
Where did you go to college?
Drexel University in Philadelphia.
Oh, cool. Very cool. Oh, yeah, Drexel. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So you mentioned rehearsal and production. So are there any particular shows or roles from your time at LaGuardia that stand out or that you're particularly proud of?
Absolutely. And
I could just see you light up.
I'm blushing thinking about it because I just went over to my mother's house. As a New Yorker, my grandmother still lives here. And I went to visit them maybe like 2 weeks ago just to kind of hang out a little bit. And I was digging through some old relics in my old bedroom. And I found a recording of me rehearsing Pirate Jenny for the 3 penny opera production that they did.
Oh, wow.
The main stage production, which I actually got cast in. But it was really amazing to kind of just hear my 15-year-old self practice in a cappella because it was so important for me at that time as a 15-year-old in drama to prove myself as a singer, musical theater artist to all of the vocal majors and to all of the teachers who were responsible for that particular production because I would say a lot of vocal majors would get cast in the musicals just because they were more vocally equipped for those kind of productions.
Sure. That's kind of a weird off the beaten path show to do in high school also.
Very mature, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, it's dark and mature and yeah.
Yeah.
And you don't see it produced that much. It's not something that's mounted all that much. That's so interesting. I'm trying to remember, PJ, when Jen Kemp was on here for a show we did, she was talking about how she had seen a production of it that was so bad that it turned her on the material. And I was like, it's one of those things where you really need a good cast. Because I remember, gosh, it was Cyndi Lauper and Alan Cumming did it on Broadway like 15 years ago.
Yes.
And I remember enjoying that. So, but that's so interesting.
One of my favorite productions. I'm also a big Brecht fan, and
sure.
And that's where I think my love affair for Brecht started, was in high school because of that production. I'm so obsessed with the music of Three Penny Opera.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's great. Were there other shows that you did that stood out, or plays as opposed to musicals?
Oh yes, I remember my senior production I did, as our senior. Our final production was Witness for the Prosecution.
Oh,
so we do a lot of mature.
Yeah.
Theater. I mean, LaGuardia. I mean, we would do Chekhov. We did so many things. I'm actually, as I'm talking about it, I'm really kind of impressed. I remember our entry. The first thing they told us before we even stepped foot into the school, our freshman year. So what are we, 13, 14 years old? They were like, everyone get an actor prepares the Stanislavski book. And it was like, Stanislavski? And we had to read this book before we stepped foot into a class. We're only about 14 years, not even 14, 13 years old. And so, 14 maybe. And so, I mean, just that alone already told me that I was walking into an institution that was going to be very different from the science school I just left.
Sure, but I think the proof is in the pudding, right? I mean, here so many, notable people came out of LaGuardia, obviously yourself, and I'm sure there are other people there at the same time as you who have gone on to have great careers. And, so at what point did you know that Tisch and NYU and continuing on in this world of drama was what you wanted to do?
It just made sense to me. I mean, once again, the way that I manifested the idea, or not even just manifested, it was certain to me I had to go to LaGuardia, was the same way I felt about NYU. It was just it just made sense to me. And I think that's kind of how I always looked at life. It was always a sense of certainty. It was just I have to do this thing because it just makes sense. And so I would focus my intention on the thing that I wanted, and I would just do it. If I didn't get it, then I would fight to try to have it. And
sure.
So even with NYU, I remember actually, I love telling the stories. I just think it's funny. But when I was a junior, was I a junior or sophomore year? I always forget whether I was a sophomore, I was definitely my last semester of sophomore year of high school. I had a guidance counselor tell me, she was like, so, this is a check-in to see what your plans are for college, because you're going to go into junior year and you have to start making some plans. She was like, so what are you thinking about colleges? And I was like, NYU. She was like, yeah, but I'm looking at your grades right now. And I got to say, no, I'm sorry. It's junior year. I always forget.
Okay.
It's first semester junior year. So she's like, I'm looking at your grades right now, and they're pretty average. I mean, you're at 80, you're an 86 average, and they're not taking kids unless they're 92, 94 and above. And I was like, okay. She was like, but you only have you have a year and a half to fix that. And that's going to be very difficult. So I'm not sure if this is an institution for you. I was like, no, it's okay. I'm going to fix it. And that's exactly what I did. And by the time that I graduated from high school, I had a 90, a 94, 95 average, because I was
wow.
I'm going to NYU. There's no other choice, because this is what I need and want to do.
Sure.
And so I took a lot of classes. I also kind of programmed myself to take a lot of electives and things that would just make me look good for college. And, I was part of the congressional leadership program because I was kind of interested in law. I did something I worked at the DA's office one summer. I just needed to collect whatever data I could in order to make myself look like a substantial human. And so, because I needed to go to NYU. I just
sure. Yeah. Look, you manifested it and you made it happen. That's impressive. That's a rare sense of dedication. And did you have to audition as well for Tisch? Is that part of the process?
I did. I remember singing Oh yes, it was Sondheim's. Oh yes, I remember this. It was Sondheim's. Children would listen.
Oh, sure. Mm-hmm.
There's a title. It's not Children Would Listen. It's wait oh wait camera hand to say Children Would Listen. No, please not do. Oh, wait, what is the title? I'm like completely lost right now. Stay with me. Stay with me. Stay with me.
Yeah. Okay.
That's what I said.
There you go.
But it's mostly because, and actually, this is actually an interesting story. It's mostly because I that morning had one of my friends play the Linda Eder version of Don Quixote, but he played it in the wrong key. So by the time that it was time for my audition, I kid you not, I had to improvise because I put the tape in and I was like, that's the wrong key.
Oh, gosh.
And so, can I sing something else? And she was like, fine. I literally went from choosing to sing the Linda Eder version of Don Quixote to singing Stay With Me. Like, just
there you go.
Because I was like, I can't do this.
And it worked because you got in.
I did. And I got into Playwrights Horizons, which was interesting because they choose the program for you. So when you audition, they kind of decide where you're at in terms of your creativity. And I wonder if it's because of that moment of kind of changing my audition on the spot. And she was like, well, let's just put her in Playwrights Horizons, not Cat 21. Which was interesting because Playwrights Horizons was actually for creators. I mean, we were directors and designers and actors in that program.
Wow. So, but did you act and do projects in college, or were you mostly on the technical side?
No, I was definitely in the acting program.
Okay.
Playwrights Horizon, they have various programs in Tisch.
Sure.
So Playwrights Horizons, what they do in their freshman year is teach you everything. So they teach you, they teach you directing, they teach you design, they teach you dance, they teach you acting, they teach you voice. So you learn everything. So by your second year, you can choose what you actually want to focus on. So obviously I focused on, the acting. And then by my third year, I left Playwrights Horizons and auditioned for the classical program and got into that program and kind of dedicated my third year into Shakespeare.
Awesome. Wow. That's impressive. I didn't realize that your training was so classical. That's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say, like, art has just been a part of my life, and even speaking of classical, being a part of Harlem School of the Arts, I started doing shows with them even when I was a teenager for the Classical Theater of Harlem, because Harlem School of the Arts, Classical Theater of Harlem was the extension of Harlem School of the Arts. And so I just been dedicating my whole life to this thing we call art.
Yeah, believe me, I resonate with that on a very deep personal level. I totally get it.
You kind of have to keep yourself well versed, just because you just know how your creativity will influence anything that you do. And it's just kind of important, I think, for all artists to be well-rounded in all aspects of the arts.
I agree. I mean, this isn't about me. This is about you. But like I said, I went to film school, then I got my master's in television, and then I worked in television, and then I found my way to theater, which was my true love anyways. And so you just, if you can keep it all open to you, the sky's the limit for what you can achieve. I'm always curious when we talk to people about their college experience, especially when they go to a very notable college for drama or acting, what you felt the tone was like. Because you hear stories about it being cutthroat, between the students or collaborative. I'm so curious what your experience was like in that regard.
Yes. I mean, I will admit that there were, I was in a very particular situation because I was also a commuter student. And so I always had to go home. I was also always worried about paying my school bill because it was incredibly expensive. So I worked outside of school. So my college experience kind of almost felt like high school a little bit.
Okay.
Because I didn't really have like the campus, atmosphere, or didn't really hang out on campus a lot, because I was really driven about, let me just get into this institution, do what I need to do, and just get out of there. It was really focused.
Sure.
I didn't necessarily find it cutthroat per se, but it was very competitive and, getting in. And it was also very competitive as you try to find your way of getting out, because you need to figure out what your next step is. And you'll end up discovering a lot of your friends who you graduated with didn't actually sustain in doing the arts. It's not something that they're actually doing till this day. And so there's a competitiveness that you are taught, but in some ways it's not always sustainable. So that's always the part about being in an institution that big.
Interesting. I want to jump around chronologically just a little bit because it's kind of relevant to NYU. Obviously, with Bounty Hunter, you ended up working with Joe Iconis and Jen Tepper and all these people. And, a lot of them were at NYU. I didn't, did your cross paths? I'm not sure, if you guys were there around the same time. I'm not positive.
Crazy thing is that we didn't actually cross paths. However,
I should have said, did your paths cross? I said, did your cross path, which is, I just invented a new phrase.
I like that. Let's put it in the dictionary.
Still came put it in. It was very clear. No, unfortunately, no, I did not know them at that time. But I actually had heard about Joe a lot after I had graduated, because I had friends, and sometimes myself would actually frequently go back to NYU and kind of visit our teachers, and would be asked to do like small little seminars and talk to the students and things like that. And so I remember hearing about him, but not necessarily knowing who he was personally. Sure. I was totally stoked, because once I had learned about him back then I started doing my research and learning that he had known a lot of our circle of friends. And I was like, oh, this guy knows all of our friends, and he makes this really cool music. But didn't associate him with musical theater, because once again, musical theater wasn't necessarily the actual focus for me. And so I wasn't in a headspace where I was necessarily following the next best composer.
Sure.
I was probably more
interesting.
Yeah, at that time I really wasn't. Actually, I got involved in musical theater because when I graduated from school, I auditioned for Rent, the non-union national tour, and then got in, and I was like, well, I guess I'll be doing this. And that kind of set the tone for everything that happened in the last 15 years.
So you went on the non-ec Rent tour for a while?
Yes, I was there for like 10 months. Yeah, wow. It was a long tour. Yeah, it was amazing. Amazing.
Yeah, tours are great, but non-ec tours can be dicey at times.
It taught me some tough skin, because I was not only on that tour as a newbie, but I was also a swing. So I was kind of not prepared. And I have to say, I'll toot my own horn and say I was a very good swing, because I'm just my work ethic is all about trying to do things right. However, emotionally, it just wasn't the job for me, because I eagerly wanted to perform every single night, which is why I credit to all the swings out there, because like it is such a hard job to just jump.
I have always sort of felt like swings are like the unsung heroes of Broadway. And for those watching who aren't familiar, a swing is essentially someone who gets trained to go on multiple tracks at any night on a moment's notice. They can know 3, 4, 5 roles on ensemble tracks, supporting roles, lead roles. And so they may not go on every night, but they can go on Monday night as one role, Tuesday night in a different track. It's an immense amount of work to be able to compartmentalize and remember everything. I can't imagine.
Yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot that I was not prepared for, but it was the one thing I can say that prepared me for the rest of my life, because of the forced work ethic that I had to learn very early on. That I was not. I mean, when I took the job, I was like, I don't really know what a swing is. I just know I perform all the time, But then I found out that I perform almost all the time, just because we're on tour and things happen on tour. People get sick and tired, because it's a very laborious thing to do every single day when you're on when you're you're traveling on a bus, you know, and you're hitting up a city maybe for one night, and then you have to do another city for another city.
Right. That's the other big difference between a non-ec tour is they'll hit a city for a day or two, whereas an equity tour could have a 2-3 week sit down somewhere. So that's wow.
Yeah.
So that was your first professional gig after college.
Yeah, so that was definitely my first professional gig. And then I think I remember going back to Classical Theater of Harlem and doing some shows there. I did King Lear with Andre de Shields.
Oh, amazing.
Really cool.
I've gotten to know him a little bit because I'm involved in Hadestown, and honestly, like,
he's amazing.
I am not convinced he's human. Like, when he walks towards you, he sort of just like levitates with coolness. Like, I don't feel like I deserve to be like, that's when my imposter syndrome is like at its most. Like, I should not be anywhere near this man.
He's so regal. He's amazing. So
regal. That's a perfect word for him. Yeah.
Yeah, he's regal. And I think I was only about 22 at that time too. And so, yeah, we did a production here in New York City. And then we also did a production at the Folger Theater in DC. And so, and I believe that's actually when I got my equity card, which was awesome because, you know, didn't realize I would need that for the rest of my life too, to do other things.
Yeah. I don't know. A previous episode, we were talking about how, and I'm not sure if I agree with it, but how if you don't have your equity card, a lot of times you won't even be seen for auditions.
Yeah.
Or they'll say, you know, if we have time at the end, we'll see, you know, non-ec people, and then they don't take you seriously, or so it's a unique and kind of antiquated process in my mind.
It's so true. The many times I stood on the line just waiting to be seen for like 30 seconds was just like one of the hardest times in my life, but I think one of the most amazing learning lessons, because that's where you learn the technique of auditioning. And that's when you learn the technique of also learning how to fail and how to learn what it feels like to actually not get a job, go back home, rewire your system to find the confidence to go back out there and do it all again and stand on that for hours. And so I do believe that is something that a lot of artists, you know, once we get back on track, should definitely experience if they don't have their equity card, is stand on that line and manifest the idea of what you want and know what it feels like to really hustle. Because that's part of the job, is learning how to hustle.
It is. And I mean, you've had an amazing career. You've been in so many shows on Broadway, but you know, that doesn't mean you didn't also have to face rejection and learn the hard knocks, because
more rejection than anything.
Oh, sure. That's, you know, unfortunately, that's almost all of it is building up a tolerance for being told, no, you're not right for this part, or you're not what we're looking for.
I still struggle with that. I'm like, no. I still struggle with that, you know, like
it's not something anyone can ever get over, being told that you're not good enough or you're not what we're looking for. We're not wired for that. I want to jump into some of your Broadway roles, but there's one other role I want to ask about in particular, because we have a guy named Mike K in the chat, and his favorite movie of all time is The Prince of Egypt. And I know you did the TheaterWorks production of Prince of Egypt.
I did.
So what can you tell us about that? What role did you play? Were you a fan of the movie, etc.? I'm sure Mike I'm excited. I love that movie too, and I'm sure Mike his ears are peaked now.
Wow. You know what's funny? First off, I love that you guys asked this question, because I just hung out with my homegirl today, Brennan Lark, who was in the production as well. And we were actually just talking about the production today, and it was a beautiful production. It was absolutely beautiful. I mean, Stephen Schwartz, I mean, the music, everything.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's unbeatable. Like, the music is just in itself effortless, gorgeous.
I just got chills thinking about it.
Yeah. And I played Queen Tuya, who is the leader of both Moises. Moises. Oh my God. Moises Kaufman.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, they're both Jews, right?
Yes, exactly. It's like literally on the tip of my tongue. But no, it's true. And so I play the mother, and I'm also the adopted mother of Moses. And so and I find him in the lake, and it was just a really beautifully directed production that I kind of wish had an opportunity to come to New York City. And I think there was talks of it coming to New York, but I know it hit like maybe Denmark and maybe some other places.
I think it was in London, actually. Like right before the shutdown, which... you know, I can't necessarily. Mike said the second you mentioned the Prince of Egypt, Deliver Us rushes right to my head.
Yes.
I can't say what I've heard and what I haven't heard, but I think there is still interest in bringing it to New York, certainly.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's an important production.
I think it is. I agree.
It's really, and I think, now when I think about what we've experienced with this pandemic, it might have even more of a purpose right now, because it really is about believing in yourself and believing in your own power to be whoever you choose and want to be. And that's something I think the world needs to be in contact with again, is knowing that their work does have value, that you're not a person of less value just because you're sitting at home and doing absolutely nothing and unemployment is delayed and paying you your money. Like, you still have value. And so,
and if they cast the show the way it should be cast, it's just so many incredible roles for BIPOC people, which
absolutely
we need more and more of that. We've talked about this a lot on here with our guests and just on other stuff that obviously this year, well, I guess it's 2021 now, time has no meaning anymore, but
time is a construct.
The conversation surrounding systemic racism has reached an apex, which is a long time coming, and it influences all aspects of society, particularly theater. And I hope that the right people have taken this opportunity when they're not having to work and produce shows to realize that you can't just throw one or two Black or brown or Asian people in your ensemble and check off your boxes and say it's good enough. It needs to be.
It's not about that.
It's not about checking boxes, in my opinion.
It's not, because a lot of people of various colors come from a story, comes from a history, and you can't just throw. I remember Tanya Pinkins, who I really love. She made a statement a long time ago when she did Mother Courage. And I remember she came out with a manifesto, and she had come out to explain why she had to leave the production. One of the things that I think that she said in that essay that I think was really important was that just because you put Black people in the production of Mother Courage does not mean it's suddenly a Black production. You have to change the content, the story.
Sure.
Like, we come from different journeys. And so, and what makes it actually a Black production is the journey of what these Black people have experienced prior to this moment. And if that's not injected into the production, then you can't really call it the all Black production of Mother Courage.
Absolutely.
Pretty spot on.
That makes a lot of sense. We had very early on in our show, we had Heath Saunders on as a guest.
Love him.
He's incredible, and he was talking quite a bit about how, on top of his performance work, he is serving as a self-proclaimed diversity dramaturg or an inclusion dramaturg, whichever phrasing fits. He used both, which I thought was so fascinating, and he brought up many similar points where it's not just about who you cast, but if the piece needs to be adjusted to reflect their experience to make it more authentic.
Yes, absolutely. That totally makes sense, because it's not going, because what it does to us as the artists is that we start to feel like we're suffocating and that we're not bringing authenticity into the piece, because then it doesn't feel true to the actual experience that matches the color of our story. And so that's where I think he's spot on about that. We have to have more of that in the room. But we also have to start reevaluating the pieces and shows that we choose to truly, if we're going to make it a diverse piece, we have to choose a diverse production in content.
Yep. I have no problem calling it out. I've called it out on here, but the last thing we need right now is another fucking Music Man with an all-white cast.
I mean, right.
I'm not going to keep my mouth shut about it. It's like, yes, Hugh Jackman and Sutton Foster sell tickets and are incredible performers, but from top to bottom down the line, everyone you cast in that show is white, and that's
right. And I also heard there is some productions that might be coming out that were like, I think I heard like a rumor that maybe Hidden Figures is like coming to Broadway, but it's like things like that. It's still like, it's not really about doing another Black production. It's about it's really about like telling stories from a Black perspective, and that's just a little bit different because that was also not written by a person of color. And so that's, I think, another thing that has to be enforced is just like the actual storytelling coming from the Black perspective, whether it's injected with whites or Blacks, no matter what color you are, I think the representation that needs to be said are stories being told from the mouths of people of color.
I agree. I think that's really well said. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
But yeah, it's just it's something that needs to be addressed head on. I think it's time to put up or shut up. And
yes,
I feel strongly that I'm trying to think of how to phrase this without getting too many people angry. The old white guard that has ruled the roost for decades needs to be phased out for something that looks more like what the world actually looks like.
Yes.
Particularly in the people in power.
Yes, we have to be flexible. We have to be courageous. And we also have to be courageous in the fear of failing and knowing that our failure actually could possibly be a win. But we won't know that unless we try. And I think that's where courage comes in. It's just taking a risk. Take a risk.
So there's no good sequitur to switch gears here, but let's talk American Idiot.
Yeah.
Did you do it at Berkeley before it came to Broadway?
I did. I played the Extraordinary Girl in Berkeley, and we had done a couple of trials before we got to Berkeley too. So we were very prepared for Berkeley because we had done at least 3 workshops prior to that. So yeah, definitely did in Berkeley, and then did it in New York City in what was it, 2010?
10 into 11, yeah, something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
And that was your Broadway debut?
That was my Broadway debut.
God, and what a show for it to be, because honestly, even in the intervening years, I don't think there's been anything that's quite captured the same energy.
I know. I agree. And I'm not even just saying that because I'm biased. It just was a completely different beast. And I sometimes believe it was before its time.
Oh, I completely agree that it was before its time. I was talking, I don't remember who to, not online or anything, about saying how even though it did fairly well, it was before its time. Yeah, I agree with that.
Absolutely. I mean, although it was so appropriate for the time, which is why it's like kind of like
it's also as appropriate now, if not more so than it was back then. Even just the album, the messaging of Green Day's album is like, it was born out of Bush era politics, but that shit goes even deeper in this post-Trump world where the idiocy has just gotten even worse.
It's gotten worse. I know. It's so relevant. And, I think about what are the possibilities. I heard rumors about there being a movie, and this was all obviously pre-pandemic. But it makes me curious because I do believe there is still space for that show. And I can't believe it only lasts for a year. And like till this day, I'm like, I can't even believe it.
I don't want to, I hope I'm not bringing up sour grapes, but even back then I felt like it was needlessly disrespected by the like more highbrow theatrical community, particularly awards. Not that awards, in my opinion, are like any sort of legitimate arbiter for what makes great art. To me, great art is whatever endures in each individual's heart and mind. Like 20 years from now, no one's going to be talking about what won Best Picture. They're going to be talking about what movies they love, right?
Yes.
But still, I remember thinking at the time, like this, like they're giving Addams Family this shit, and they're like scoffing at American Idiot, which like, sure, it's a punk rock loud musical, but from an artistic standpoint, to me, was so much more accomplished. I mean, you had the choreography, the orchestrations, which were the orchestrations are. Oh my god, I can't. Why it's on. I can't remember his name. Tom Kitt. Yeah, thank you. Gosh, Tom Kitt's orchestrations were stunning. The performances, just
Michael Mayer, the director. I mean, it was absolutely.
And Michael Mayer was busy that year because I think that was the same year he did Everyday Rapture.
Yes, that's right. He did.
And Hedwig wasn't that far after it, so he's a busy guy.
He also did the one with what was the other show that he did with Harry Connick Jr. And that's
was that It Should Have Been You?
No. And I remember actually it was the debut of I never met her, who was in Waitress.
Jessie Mueller?
Jessie Mueller. They did a production. I can't remember the name right now because I actually didn't get a chance to see it, unfortunately. So that's why it's not sticking. But I know he was also busy into transitioning to that production as well.
He was very busy that season. But So American Idiot, like I said, it just had like this incredible energy, and it was one act, no intermission. Majority of the cast was on the stage the whole time. How did you survive and keep up? What tricks and tips? Because the vocals were nuts. I mean, it was just, and by the way, you were on that fly rig.
Yes.
Which was spectacular. And I'm sure it's like, here's your Broadway debut. You got to get in this harness and fly around the stage while singing upside down.
Yeah.
Have fun.
It was crazy. It was crazy. Well, it was mostly crazy because besides playing the extraordinary girl who flew, the upside down girl who was in the first 3.5 minutes of the opening, who was like literally headbanging, that was created because, because it just made sense to make whoever was flying as the extraordinary girl that ensemble girl as well.
Sure.
That was actually created because we were looking at Christine Jones's collage, and she loves making collages with like people in them, just to kind of like create an environment, especially for this production. And there was someone who was literally upside down, and I was like, I just think that would be really cool to have someone upside down. Mike Mayer was like, fine, you're the person who's going to be upside down. And I was like, oh, okay. And so it was just such a wonderful, creatively open environment where, I mean, a lot of the choreography was even built by us because Stephen Hoggett, who's one of my favorite choreographers.
Yeah, he's pretty genius.
He's a genius. And a lot of his choreography is really about the human condition and like pedestrian movements. And how do you make non-dancers into spectacular dancers? Not one of us were actually trained dancers, but when I went back to see the production for that last production, I wasn't in the last show because I had left by that time. I went to go see that last production, and I was blown away, and mostly blown away by the dancing and the agility of all of us.
Yeah.
I can't believe that we did that 8 times a week.
I remember, like I said in your introduction, I was at the first preview and I saw it many times, and every time I was exhausted from watching it because it was such a visceral experience. I couldn't even imagine performing it 8 times a week.
I mean, I can't even. I look back at it now and I'm like, well, I was also in the best shape of my life because I had no choice. But I mean, what a production physically.
Yeah. One of the cool things the show started to do was bringing in lots of interesting, fun people to play St. Jimmy. So you got to work with Billy Joe himself.
Yeah.
I don't know when your contract lined up, if you were there when they brought in Melissa Etheridge or Davey. I saw her. I saw Davey Havoc from AFI do it. I if I'm not mistaken, I even ended up at one show where Chase Peacock played St. Jimmy.
He did.
Which was wild because that was so against type for him, but was it crazy and fun to actually like act with Billy Joe himself in the show based on his music?
Absolutely. I mean, it just made sense. If anything, it just made sense. I mean, I have to say, I will give a lot of credit to Green Day at the group themselves. They treated us until this day with such care. They'll send us cards, Christmas cards every so often, just hop in a line, or send us an email just to say hello. But even at that time, they were so hands-on and very much available to supporting us while we were doing this production. I mean, especially when we went to Berkeley, because that was kind of like their home, being as close to
Sure.
And so they were very much involved. I mean, I can almost say for a long time, they felt like family. And that was a weird thing coming from our generation because we grew up watching them, our generation. And so from them to be like, from fan to family was just the most bizarre thing. But they are one of the most amazing people. And then working with Billy, one of the most humbling experiences was to see him have a moment of like, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm willing to give this a shot, and I'm thankful for your support, for all of your support in this. So he even had moments of like, I wouldn't necessarily say insecurity, but like curiosity of what this theater was. And I just think he was so brave at the time to take a risk at that. And he was fantastic in it. I mean, he created it. I think he shocked himself of how good he was in it. And Melissa was amazing. I mean,
she was. I thought,
voice.
I love Davey Havoc too, because I love AFI, and I thought his voice was perfect for that role.
I think I saw Davey in the production. Was he in the last production?
I don't remember. No, he only did it for like 2 weeks because he was the lead singer of a pretty well-known like post-hardcore band called AFI.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That was popular like around the same time as My Chemical Romance and Fall Out Boy sort of stuff. So no, he just did it for 2 weeks.
Okay, then I definitely heard about him, but didn't get a chance to see his production.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I assume then that you got to perform at the Grammys with the cast too.
We did.
What was that like? That was before the show opened on Broadway, right?
Yeah, it was.
So you had yet to make your Broadway debut, and you're performing at the Grammys.
I was like, "What is happening with life?"
Yeah.
Once again, when you think about like now that I've told you my whole life story prior to this moment, I'm still surprised that I'm doing musical theater, and so like, but also to do rock kind of actually makes sense to me because I feel like rock is kind of like a dramatic piece. It's something very. Rock in itself always feels like a play to me. It has this angst. There's something about even just structurally the way it's written on the page. It looks like just verses in the way that you kind of read like Shakespeare or something.
Yeah,
it's in prose or verse. So, anyways, yes, the Grammys were amazing. Kind of literally blows my mind when I think about it because I was so young and. I remember being so nervous when I had to sing my solo. And I just remember when the mic was this close because I was so afraid to like bring it down because my arm was completely stiff. But I remember looking out into the audience and I saw like Bob Dylan and Beyonce and Jay-Z. And I was like, oh, this is really kind of happening, you know?
Yeah.
But I have to say, out of all the things I think I've done in life, that might have been the most nerve-wracking thing I ever experienced because it was live. And there was no turning back.
Right.
And this was live for the entire world. This wasn't just like for 900 people in theater or 2,000 people. And this was before Broadway for us.
Right.
We did it that January before we started rehearsals.
Wow.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we did, didn't we? Gosh, I can't believe we did that before we actually went to Broadway. That was just
that's crazy. Well, it was great promotion for the show, but
yeah, totally.
Crazy.
But yeah, the Grammys were something else.
Yeah, that's wow. So obviously Billy Joe was in the show. Did the other guys from the band ever like sneak in and play with the pit for a couple performances and have some fun?
Not necessarily during the show, but there would be moments of after shows, and so like although there was always a time limit for most people to exit the theater, if Green Day came to the theater, there would be that after show. And sometimes you would have like, you know, Mike and Trey Cool would just be on the drums. And so like it became a rock concert. And you had to like literally stop yourself from having to crowd surf because that's what it felt like it was going to, but you can't crowd surf in the the St. James.
St. James, yeah.
Oh my God, it's like so many theaters. St. James Theater, you can't really do that. It's not designed to do that, but it's been done.
Right.
We've done that before where we've kind of like crowd surfed.
Yeah.
In the St. James Theater.
So if my timing is correct, you left Idiot to do Baby It's You, where you had a lead role playing Shirley Owens, who is a lead singer of the Shirelles, a real life person.
Yes.
What was the experience portraying someone real? How much research did you do? Did you get to meet her and talk to her before playing her?
Yes. So first off, wow, like Baby It's You was a very special production because for me, that tapped into music that I've always known because my mother and my grandmother would listen to oldies all the time.
Sure.
So that was like a privilege to have that opportunity to play Shirley. Never got a chance to meet her until after the production was up. You know, like we already had been in production and I think we only had maybe 2 weeks left and I finally got a chance to meet her. So I never had access to her prior to the production. And I remember asking, but there were just some like, legal things and, you know, things that we couldn't actually have contact with.
Sure.
So my only reference, because there wasn't a lot of research and I was totally digging for material, was literally just listening to the vinyl, which I still have till this day, the vinyl on repeat and trying to really understand just the essence of who Shirley was through her voice. She had a very mature voice for a teenager. And so that for me was very delicious because it told me that she was an old soul. And so I kind of had to create an idea of who I thought she was just based off of her voice.
Yeah, and like I sort of alluded to earlier, I thought you were brilliant in that show. It was a shame it didn't last longer because you and Beth Level. I mean, Beth Level is a goddess, but you, I thought, were incredible, and you just never know what's gonna hit. You know, it's a shame.
I have to say though, we last longer than I think we thought we were going to. Because I mean, I remember hearing, not really necessarily seeing, but hearing about some of the reviews. But we still had a very committed audience, and we last for 6 months, which I think was
which is not bad. I mean, and I remember I only saw it once, but I remember when I went, the audience was super into it. It was lively. I think there's always an audience for those shows, whether it be Summer or Motown or Baby It's You, that sort of music. Tina now, there's always going to be audiences who want that. Ain't Too Proud to Beg. They're all sort of in the same, and I think it's great that they keep making fun shows like that. So after Baby It's You is Spider-Man?
Yes.
So let's talk about Spider-Man. So
Spider-Man.
There I was here.
Well, so I was fascinated with Spider-Man on so many levels. I mean, I have read that book that the book writer put out with Song for Spider-Man, if it's called. I don't know.
I never actually read it.
I mean, I've read a bunch of like behind the scenes exposés of like Hollywood and stuff. And this reads like this book would make an incredible movie one day. If like everything he was saying that was going on was true, like the infighting between Bono and Julie Taymor and the producers and this, that, and the other thing. But you joined it a little later. You were there from the beginning.
I did, because remember, so Spider-Man reopened one time. Well, it had one.
There were like multiple versions. There was like the Julie Taymor version.
And and then the Philip version. Yeah, we opened twice. So by the second opening, I had joined that production where it was apparently a completely different story than it was prior.
I saw it both. I think I saw it 3 different ways because I saw like the OG Julie Taymor version, and then I went to some like strange bastardized halfway point, and then the next version. Yeah, I was so fascinated by the creative process, and regardless of what anyone says, the tech on display was mind-blowing.
I mean, I think visually one of the most amazing.
Oh, when Spider-Man rides on Green Goblin's back around, it's like it doesn't get better than that.
It doesn't get better than that. I mean, he flies into the audience. Like there literally is a fight in the middle of the audience. So people are like, now, like the perspective of theater is like no longer proscenium. It's like now it's above your head. It was just like, it's like what's happening?
So was there some trepidation on your part to join the show, considering the notoriety surrounding it?
Not really. I mean, obviously I heard all the stories, but I wasn't because I had to trust by the fact that they're still running and operating 8 shows a week. And at the time I had joined them, there wasn't actually a lot of stories that came out. I had to trust that the production was just going to do its job. And then obviously, I mean, you read the book. I didn't read the book, but what you're probably read is probably similar to what I heard once I got into the space. And so you start hearing a lot of internal stories about things that actually occurred and the accidents and why the accidents actually occurred. And so you realize they were just actual freak accidents and not necessarily malfunctions of the machine itself because it was well equipped. It was just an accident. Accidents occurred. I mean, it
happens.
Yeah, it happens. Unfortunately, which is why we get that extra stipend in our paycheck, that extraordinary risk. These are the kind of things that we are at risk of, when we step into live theater. And so I wasn't necessarily afraid. And then I also felt like a trained flyer. And so I kind of had one up of the protocols
right.
in these situations. And so I feel very prepared for it.
That was going to be my next thing, is because you had flown so extensively in Idiot, you played Arachne in Spider-Man, which was a heavy flying part too.
Yes.
So you already felt comfortable on the rigs?
I did. And I got a chance to see the production of Spider-Man 2 when I went for my final callbacks just for research. And you know, the for me, the comforting part was that just looking at the fly lines in itself, I was like, oh, Arachne kind of just goes up and down. Just goes up and down. But the extraordinary girl, she went this way, that way, spinning, you know, like there was it was much more complex as the extraordinary girl in American Idiot. So I actually looked at the fly system in Spider-Man. I was like, oh, this is doable. You know, however, it was higher.
Oh.
I was not prepared for that.
Well, the fly at the Foxwoods or whatever it's called now, they've changed the name of that theater so many times, is insane.
It's like 60 feet.
It's so insane.
High.
Which is why they put that show there and why it's perfect for Harry Potter.
Perfect. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But it's massive fly. I mean, I don't think there's a bigger one. Maybe the Gershwin for Wicked, but even then, I'm not positive.
I mean, what's interesting is that actually I remember the perspective of seeing the show, and I was like, oh, she's not really. This is actually going to be fine. She's not up that high. But then when I got cast, and then I actually was in the motion of it, I was like, oh, this is high. I was like, oh, that was just an illusion because you have like the lights and you also have a little bit of a shadow and the shadow creates an illusion. But you as a single human being with just pincers and you're just like dangling by two wires. I was like, oh no, this is actually really high. Yeah, that was
because your costume in that was a full on like sort of spidery costume.
It was a bodysuit with pincers. Like that's all I could do. And even with that, I had very little access with my hands. And so, you know, and there were some mishaps that happened. I mean, there was a couple of times where the show would freeze and I would be dead center 60 feet in the air, just kind of dangling there for 20 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
But the thing is, once again, you know, they are so used to the mishaps that happened prior to those moments that they were extra diligent about making sure that was first. So I felt very safe there.
And you had a fun time overall, like you enjoyed the experience. I mean, how often do you get to fight Spider-Man?
Yeah. I mean, well, actually, see, Arachne was not the antagonist anymore.
Yeah, you're right. She sort of became like his like devil on his shoulder kind of thing, right?
Yeah, she was like his angel. So, I mean, we only had 3 special moments, and that was another thing. It's like I popped in the beginning of the show, and then I took a break for maybe like, I don't know, 30, 40 minutes, and then I came back to sing one song, you know, which was Rise Above. And then after that song, I would like disappear for maybe like an hour, and then I popped up again.
Yeah.
So
you're right, because it was a long time ago. I'm thinking back, like in the original version, like Green Goblin was defeated in the first act, and Arachne was the villain, and she had that song about shoes, which you didn't get to sing.
That's right. She was no longer the antithesis. She was definitely the
interesting.
So I only had the Hold and Wonder, Rise Above, and Turn Off the Dark. And Turn Off the Dark was the more intricate choreography because that's where she descends and then they kind of spin in a circle, but she sings the whole song in plank position.
Oi. And you said American Idiot was the best shape of your life?
Yeah, you know, surprisingly so, but I think it's because American Idiot was 90 minutes of sweat.
Sure.
See, with me, it was, if I had to count how long I was on stage, I was probably on stage for equivalent 15 minutes. Like I wasn't on stage that long. It was just broken up in 3 different moments.
Sure. Say what you will about that show, and for what it's worth, I did enjoy it as spectacle, but that one like prevailing guitar hook that they wrote, like is like been stuck in my head for decades. So they did something right.
It was a great cast. I mean, Reeve Carney, Patrick Page. It was such a
incredible. Who are now in Hadestown together.
Of course.
TV Carpio, who you replaced, and had a bigger part.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. And they all Gideon Glick and all the geek chorus that they cut out.
Oh, that's right.
They made so many
there.
Yeah, they weren't even there. So many changes. It's so rare for a show that's open and running to so drastically change itself.
So crazy. Wow.
Yeah. So, was Holler If You Hear Me next, or did you do some stuff in between?
I mean, did some things in between, with, I've been working with Moises Kaufman, which is why I made that slip.
Sure.
For many years, because we were doing, we had various productions and workshops of Carmen. So we had
worked I'm from, yes.
For like 3 years. And so like, he was kind of like my interim in projects. And so, so that's why he was actually on the tip of my tongue, because he's been very much a part of my creative process between Carmen and Paradise Square, which we just did in Berkeley with Bill T. Jones. And so, so it's been things like that, but definitely Holler If You Hear Me was the next Broadway show after Spider-Man.
I remember I've heard so much about this production of Carmen over the years. I've never seen it, but I would love to if there's going to be future life for it. It sounds like such a cool approach to the material.
Yes, there are various productions of it happening. I know there's an Alex Lacamoire version. I believe that John Doyle might have had a production as well. And Moises has had his production for several years now, where he's actually not only the director but the writer. He's reimagining the production.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. Huh. So Holler If You Hear Me is interesting because it didn't last very long, but which is weird because Tupac is, to me, one of the great artists and poets of all time.
Agreed.
And if you had come into me in a pitch meeting and said Tupac musical, I would have been like, here's a blank check.
Yeah.
So I'm a little confused why it didn't work, but at what point did you get involved? Were you in the workshops or readings?
Yes, I had been in several workshops of it before.
So
hit production.
Did you get to work with Chadwick Boseman at all then?
We did. I did. He was our he was in the production right before we actually had hired Saul. And actually, to be honest with you, I do believe it, and I don't think this is I don't think I'm speaking out of terms here, but I believe the only reason Chad couldn't do it was because of a movie that he was working on, which was James Brown.
Right.
So, we got a chance to work with Saul, who was, just as amazing. But Chad was definitely one of the contenders for the production. Definitely.
I remember right after he passed, which was I'm still so devastated. It's such a deeply felt loss. It's unfair when people just go way too young. Yeah. And everyone who's watching, if you have not watched Ma Rainey's Black Bottom on Netflix, please watch it. Not only is it incredible adaptation of the play, George C. Wolfe is a brilliant director, but what Chadwick gives to that performance is spectacular.
Yes, and to add on to that, I also feel that was his calling to do that production. I also feel like it was the thing that really matched his spirit. Like knowing Chad and knowing that his background was always in respect and love for theater, as a writer, as a visionary, because he was very much a writer as well. And I mean, he started in theater, and he had such a love affair for theater, the arts, musical theater. I do believe he has a brother that's actually in musical theater as well. And so it was really lovely to see him be in that play, because I feel like that is what definitely matched his spirit.
Yeah. Well,
I remember. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, PJ.
I was going to say, I think it explains so much of the projects he took, too, that a lot of the stuff he chose was very theatrical in nature, in a way that not every... Like, his whole filmography was full of larger-than-life people that you wouldn't necessarily get to play in other places, which is something I've always liked about him so much as a filmmaker.
True.
Like,
he played legends. He played legends.
Yeah,
I mean...
Like, if you look at it, Jackie Robinson, if you look at,
James
Thurgood
Brown.
Marshall, James Brown, and then Black Panther, he chose these larger-than-life characters that let his spirit of theater come across in a way that I don't think a lot of actors get to do. Right. And I've always appreciated that, and so I think, Maxwell, you were going to bring it up. I had never seen that footage of him rehearsing the play until he had passed away, and I was so taken aback in a beautiful way.
If I'm not mistaken, the director Kenny Leon posted it online.
Mm-hmm.
I love Kenny. I got to work with him on American Son. I think he's so brilliant. But when he posted that footage of Chad in the workshop, I was blown away because his flow and his skill rapping was not a talent we had ever seen from him.
He took that very seriously. And I will give him a lot of credit for his work ethic. He was the first person to come into the room every day. And then you would see him in the corner before starting rehearsals, practicing Tai Chi, kid you not, to prepare for our workshop production of Holler If You Hear Me. And it's only because he really did want to do a good job, And I think one of the beauties of seeing his journey in the production in our workshop was seeing him actually really want to do a good job, because the flow wasn't that easy. But I think that's what kind of makes it special, is that he worked really hard to get to that point. And I think
Sure.
that's the testament of his brilliance.
Yeah, and I'm sure, he was working with Chris Jackson, who had rapped on Broadway before. It was in Freestyle Love Supreme. He had it down pat.
Yeah, I mean, for Chris, it's like he flows probably whilst sleeping.
Yeah, Chris performed at my wedding, so I love Chris. He's the best.
I love him.
But in Holler If You Hear Me, did you rap at all?
I did. We all had to. Oof. Yes, definitely. I had to sing. I definitely sang the hook of "Life Goes On," which was our lament to one of the characters that passed away in the show. Yeah, I think once again, Holler If You Hear Me, and I love that you said a Tupac Shakur musical. I'll give you a blank check. I think once again, it was another production that was before its time.
If it had come out in a post-Hamilton theatrical landscape, who knows what might happen. I mean, In the Heights had already hit at that time, but as big as it wasn't a juggernaut like Hamilton.
That, but also it was the content. People weren't ready to address the injustice of of police brutality, which is what we addressed. People weren't really ready to address even like hood mentality and the community in itself, and how there are people living and thriving in those communities and are completely ignored. And so that was kind of the thing that we were facing, is that once again, it was a production before its time because people weren't really ready to address the issues. And there were a lot of Black injustice issues that were addressed in that show. And I just feel like it kind of just rubbed some people off the wrong way. And I say some because we actually got really great responses. I just think that we just didn't really have enough time.
Sure.
Enough time to reach the masses.
Another aspect of it, and I've talked about this as it relates to other things, is when the critical zeitgeist is predominantly run by middle-aged or older white men who can literally make or break your show with one bad review in certain publications, and it's not material that they can understand or try to relate to, you're fucked. Excuse my language, but
it's true.
It's just climbing an uphill battle, and it's not. I mean, it sounds childish to say it's not fair. But it's not. You all right, PJ?
I'll be right back. I'm coughing a lot.
Okay, I'm gonna just close the.
Sorry, guys.
No, you're good. I just want to take off the overlay because this does not look good.
It's interesting because that was after our production came after the Trayvon Martin case, and I think once again, when you think about police brutality, like it didn't really start to hit people until we had a pandemic. It's like we've been crying out loud for many years, but the voices have been kind of muted for so long. And I think it took the pandemic for us to really take pause and really pay attention. So
as if the Rodney King riots didn't happen in the early 90s. It's like this wasn't right. It's not new. Open your eyes, people. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to remember. I feel like this is the show also where they sort of altered the theater and made it like stadium seating in the orchestra.
Stadium seating. Well, I don't remember it was stadium seating, but I know they took out seats in the theater. So I think it was like this is not the best quote, and I could be wrong. I think it was like, I think they took out maybe 400 seats, but I could be wrong because they wanted to make it less. They didn't really want.
I mean that theater is well, I don't know if what it looks like anymore because they're demolishing it and moving it, but that theater is massive.
Which is crazy because it looks so different in comparison to when we were doing SpongeBob that it felt like two different productions. By the time I got there, I was like, what is this?
Sure. So let's talk about SpongeBob. I'll be the first to admit that when I first went to see SpongeBob, which was early in previews, I was a little cynical about what it was going to be. I had my for whatever they are, serious theater goer glasses on, and I was almost immediately won over by just how joyous and magical of a thing Tina and everyone created.
Yes.
I can rarely think of experiences of theater where you just leave feeling better than you came in, where it reminds you of the human spirit and shockingly politically relevant material bubbling underneath the surface, pun intended, of what was going on. So when you were cast to take over as Sandy Cheeks, had you seen it? Were you familiar with it?
Absolutely. I actually had worked on it 3 years prior.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because we did a Viacom Upfronts presentation, and I actually had, before they even went to Chicago, actually, I had the opportunity, because, there had been some Sandy Cheeks prior. I believe that Rashidra Scott had played the role, Rebecca Naomi Jones, and these are all during workshops. And then I kind of actually came in to help replace Rebecca, because she had been working on another a play with Tina at the time. So she could do both. So I came in and kind of designed this Sandy character and for the Upfronts presentation, and then kind of walked away. And then 3 years later, here I was doing the production. So I was very familiar with it because had known Ethan and Danny and already had kind of created a sort of
chemistry, rapport.
Yeah, exactly. And so it was really wonderful to come back to it and see those guys again. It was absolutely amazing.
And now the magical thing is, and Mike here in the chat said, I've only heard positive things. I cannot sing its praises enough. And they did a pro shot for Nickelodeon, which you got to do, which is incredible. So even though you weren't in the original Broadway cast, it's now preserved forever and you're in it.
Yeah, crazy, right? And it's funny because I've always wanted to do that production. When I left the workshop, it kind of just stuck with me for a very long time. And this happens with actors all the time. You get a lot of actors who might do workshops, labs, presentations, and never get the opportunity to play those roles again because they'll cast someone else. And that's just, that's just the business.
Sure.
You have to get used to that. So I find it very unique that I had the opportunity to actually come back and play a role that I believe that I also once created myself. And so it was nice to kind of, complete some unfinished business, which is what it felt like for a very long time.
That must have been such a fun show to do. I mean, just the colors and the set alone must have been a joy to sort of play in that sandbox.
Yes, it was a unique opportunity. I mean, the cast was amazing. Working with Tina, I mean, in the very short time that what's amazing is that when we did the Broadway production, I never actually had an opportunity to really work with her hands-on until we got to our live production. So that for me was definitely the privilege. I had been waiting for that opportunity to finally kind of dig in deeper with the character and with, the chemistry between Danny, Ethan, and I, and to kind of explore what those relationships were with the person who created it in their head.
Sure. Cause that show is so much like representation of Tina's vision.
I mean,
yeah.
I mean, I do this because that's exactly what it is.
No, I don't know how else to articulate it. It's just the way that it fully encompassed the theater, every aspect of it. You'd walk in and be transported to somewhere different.
Absolutely.
And just left feeling good. And there's some great songs in there. And what was remarkable for me is, you hear on paper that you have a score where pretty much every song is written by someone different. Very notable pop acts. Yet it felt cohesive and it all worked well together. You feeling better, PJ?
Yeah, I breathed wrong and just like airwaves got clogged. It was a whole thing.
It happens.
Water's great.
We were talking about SpongeBob PJ, and I know you got to see Christina in it, so
I did. And it was so funny because I'm like not the biggest fan of the property, and so it was our first night back in New York. And it had been a while for me, and we had won the lottery off of it, and I was just like, I don't know if I really want to go. Like, I really don't know if I want to see SpongeBob. And everyone was like, no, let's go. Like, we got the lottery. We should take the opportunity to do it. And I was like, you know what? You're right. I haven't seen a Broadway show in a while. Like, let's go. That show is so charming. The music is so good, and you were excellent in it. I wanted to tell you this before we were got on, but like I had so much fun with it, and it made me appreciate the property. And I kid you not, to this day, the cast album is still one of my most played. Like I think the music is so great.
It is very charming. That's a great word for it too.
Yeah.
I think, we think of SpongeBob, we're like, oh, is this a kid's show? What is this? Who is this actually for? Who is it reaching? And then you go, and it's not only just a family show. It actually has a lot of adult content to not only reach the parents. So when they bring their kids, they're like, oh, it's just, okay, it's just for my child. But then you hear all the adult content, and then they have something to relate to, which I think is like such a great family show with a lot of edge too.
Totally,
it did, and like I was saying, thematic relevance to what was going on in society.
Much.
Yes, another one relevant.
Everything from the way that the news media and stuff was portrayed in it to the stuff with the racial injustice that was going on and like people being outsiders for being different. Like, it was so funny because I was working in hospitality at my day job at the time, and people would come through, and I worked at a hotel, and so we were right next to LAX, and people would be staying with us like overnight and then like heading to New York and stuff. And for the longest time, anytime anyone with families would come through, I was like, go see SpongeBob before, like, and I was like, go see it. You like, your whole family will enjoy it. And I just kept pushing it, and some of them would come back and they were like, thank you, like, which I thought was super cool. And I was like, I push people to go see it because I thought they should. It's a great gateway musical too.
It's a great production. Yeah. Like, I think it was very surprising, but then if you're a theater nerd and Tina Landau, especially, like going to Tisch and then knowing that you studied viewpoints, like I was already obsessed with her prior to the production because you studied her. And I was like so ready to do viewpoints. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm doing viewpoints with the viewpoints like theater, and I actually felt like extra proud of myself because I was doing viewpoints, like instinctually because I knew that's what she wanted. And so I was just obsessed because I'm like a big Tina Landau fan just in general when it comes to technique. Yeah. So I think I think she put her like life into that show, and it definitely blossomed in the show itself.
Yeah. And if you didn't get a chance to see it, like I said, there is a beautiful pro shot of it. I think you can rent it on Amazon or buy it for like a couple bucks. It's well worth your time. And as we're still stuck at home, it's like a taste of live theater, and it's just so joyous. It'll leave you feeling better than when you sat down to watch it. And that's my guarantee.
Agreed. Like,
my only last question is, how was the accent hard to nail? Because Sandy has a pretty thick accent.
It's funny. I was so ready to be like called out on the accent because we had a few Texans in that production. Danny included. He's from Texas, and so I would check in with him, but no one actually corrected me. But I know there were moments I went too far and just no one corrected me. So it wasn't that it was necessarily hard. What was actually harder to sustain was the voice in itself. That whole thing, like even as I'm doing it now, I'm exhausted because I think you have to take that to a whole nother place, and you have to warm up even just to speak. And so it wasn't necessarily the Texas accent that was the hard part. It was definitely the speaking voice, because that is actually part of the character itself. She has such a unique timbre to her voice in general.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Talk a little bit about Broadway Bounty Hunter before we start to wrap up. That was my first time in a playbill, my producing debut. I'm still so proud of it. I'm glad there's a cast album that'll live on, and I'd love to be able to mount it again sometime because I don't think it got what it deserved. But your role was so fun and kind of sexy and a little out there. What was that experience like? I mean, for those who don't know, Christina played basically a how do we phrase it?
A crack hoe.
That's one way.
Stripper / escort. I don't know. What word do you want to use? Name Janessa.
Janessa. Yeah. I like how such dignity. We're like
Janessa. And you had that one huge number, but then you were in other stuff. But what was that like to have to put yourself out there in such a, I would imagine, vulnerable way?
I mean,
frankly, the costume left a little to the imagination.
Yes, it did. Wow, what was it like? It was very. I think it was such a great representation of me because I love taking roles that have athleticism. And so for me, that was kind of the appeal. It was like, I get to really do cool things with my body because I just love to be kind of like a physical. I like to be a physical actor. So yeah, it was totally fun. It was totally cool. The music was amazing, and it definitely gives you that whole Superfly,
Yeah.
you know, that kind of whole vibe, which I'm obsessed with, and and so that for me was definitely.
I love 70s blaxploitation films like Superfly, like you said, or Foxy Brown, or some Action Jackson. So many great movies from back then.
That the blaxploitation,
Shaft, of course, Richard Roundtree. Forget it.
Yes.
I mean, name the character Mac Roundtree in The Thing, which was an obvious reference to Richard Roundtree.
Exactly. I just to give you a cool little tidbit. Fun fact: I actually worked with Melvin Van Peebles, who was like one of the all the blaxploitation films.
Yeah, absolutely.
I worked with him years ago, and we actually did a remake of his Sweet Back Badass song as a theatrical production at the Apollo like years ago as a workshop.
Wow!
Cool. He was trying to make that into like a play sort of or a musical, but we got a chance to work with him directly. So it was interesting to see the mastermind behind that production, who is like the guru of like black
Yeah, and his son Mario has gone on to have a great career, like holding on the traditions of blaxploitation as well. Mario Van Peebles. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah,
Joe. I don't know. Joe is just so gifted.
Yep.
There's
no other way to say it. I mean, he just is.
And there's no style he's shown he can't write in.
No, he writes everything.
Almost unfair.
It's so unfair, and it's so human. It's always a human experience. My favorite thing is actually listening to Joe sing his own music. Before like the artists get it, my favorite is to watch him play and sing his own music. And it's because when he sings it, it's storytelling. It's
that's what I always said. Is he writes storytelling songs like the Sheila Nail song from Love and Hate Nation. Which he would perform himself a bunch at like his Iconis Family concerts around the summer when both Be More Chill and Bounty Hunter were sort of happening all at once. He would sing it, and no one's going to say that he is the most technically proficient vocalist, but what he brings to it is so much more important than, being perfectly on key or having good vibrato. He just brings it all in that storytelling and makes it so magical.
I think that is kind of the essence of theater. I would love for us to get back to that, is the storytelling, because I think sometimes we get so stuck on how people sound that we are just forgetting to write music for story, and we write all these amazing things on the page, but sometimes you can just do very simple, very simple storytelling with the voice. Like we don't have to do a lot. And which is why I think Joe is a great example for that, because he just tells a story and everyone listens. It's just that simple.
You don't always necessarily have to riff the most or hit the notes if you're using or oversing if you are,
So I understand, and I think that's why it's so cool to kind of identify that in its simplest form.
Yeah, it's and that's, I think, one of the great things about Sondheim, who you mentioned earlier, is his music is very difficult to sing, but honestly, he doesn't care so much as long as you're telling the story properly and you're being true to the characters. If you're, because some of those phrases that he comes up with, I don't even understand how you could do that 8 times a week.
It's so true.
So
true. Oh, the phrasing in Sondheim. Woof.
I want to talk a little bit about some of your foray into television. You have had some guest spots on some cool shows like Blue Buds, Chicago Med, Alpha House, and then my favorite was you were in the Jesus Christ Superstar Live, which to me is still the like high watermark for like the new era of live musicals on TV. Nothing has come close to what you guys accomplished.
Wait, first off, what's so crazy is that when you actually mention credits, I like forget. Like, not just forget that I've done them, but forget. I just want to say thank you, because during a time like this, it's so easy to forget who you are. And so I thank you for reminding me who I am, because like I'm like, wow, that sounds like a really busy woman.
Oh, I appreciate that. I like, I like to put a little time in and research the guests because I think everyone who's on is super talented and deserves that respect. But what you just said is literally why I wanted to do this show, because in this time where people are detached from the theater and maybe losing some of themselves, it's a little way to hold on to it and remember. So you just validated the entire existence of this show. So thank you.
No, I just did Broadway sessions with Ben Cameron today because he has a production. He's celebrating Black History Month. And I literally was like, oh, I'm in front of a microphone. Like, I forgot what that felt like to sing in front of a microphone that wasn't like in the corner of my room.
Sure.
For, something else, And so it was really nice to be on a stage, have a few people there, and just sing in a microphone and remember who you are as an artist. So thank you.
Thank you.
Did some TV, and which is something I'm coming back to, because as much as I love theater with all of my heart, when we talk about LaGuardia High School and NYU, for me, what I need to go back to is what the intentions were. And that was the focus on film and television. And so it's nice to have the opportunity. And those projects, the Bootleg and Chicago Man that you mentioned, happened right before the pandemic, thankfully. That was in January and February of last year.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it just happened right before everything hit. And I felt very blessed for that opportunity because I needed to know that I was capable of doing it. And it's hard to know you're capable when you literally drown yourself in just doing theater. And sometimes the industry will put you in a box and think that's what you're capable of doing. So my entire 2020 with this pandemic is about not only proving to the industry that I can do TV, but also trying to prove to myself that I'm capable. And that has been
I certainly think you're capable.
Oh, thanks.
Agreed. I'd cast you if I had a TV show to cast.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. No, I appreciate that. No, and so I think, it's just trying to stay sharp, trying to watch some master classes and trying to get back to the basics, because if I don't get TV, then I will feel like, and when I say TV, I mean like a TV show where it's like a series regular, recurring, I will feel like I'm missing out on an opportunity of what started this whole journey for me.
Sure.
3 years old.
So are you like actively auditioning now? I mean, I don't know what's happening. I mean, pilot season this year, I'm sure, is really weird and a little different than normal, but.
I am. And I have to say, more active now, probably more than I ever had in my entire career in film. I mean, I would say this has been the busiest year for film and television that I've ever experienced in my entire life. And it's a lot of practice, a lot of self-tapes, a lot of sharpening, a lot of memorizing. And a lot of my perfectionism comes into place. I want to give the best possible presentation because you only got one shot. One
first impression.
Exactly. And then, and sometimes, you got one scene and that might take me 3 hours to tape, but you know what? It's my dream and it's going to take 3 hours. And so I'm just trying to find a way to be my best possible self because, we don't know when theater is coming back. We don't, it's very indefinite at this point.
Very indefinite.
And so, I mean, I know I might be directing this summer at Weather Vane, but even that's a little bit in the air. There's uncertainty about that because we don't know what's going to happen in the next couple of months. And so everything that's happening, the only thing I can truly depend on is television. I don't think I can mention it, but I was lucky enough to book something actually in December. And I actually was released off on hold. So this is why I was able to do this, which is really great. So I got released for something. But what's been really great is to know that casting directors who didn't know me in film and television are actually giving me an opportunity to audition for them to see what the next.
Oh, that's great.
That's amazing.
I think there's so many roles you'd be great for, and I wish you nothing but success in that. I think we'll be seeing a lot of you on television in the next couple of years.
Oh, I really want to do it.
Well, look, if you've proven anything to me over the last hour and a half, is that when you put your mind to something, you accomplish it. So I see no reason why you won't.
This mind is always moving. As you can see, it's like 11:55, and I'm like widely awake. I'm like,
oh yeah, totally. So I'm gonna hand it over to PJ now, who has some sort of quick questions, sort of unrelated to theater, to ask you before we wrap up.
Awesome.
Yeah, and it's just like fun, quick questions, but it's not like Fast Money. You don't have to answer it like right away. Take your time. You know, it'll be fun. But one of our things here, we talk about Broadway and stuff, but we also love movies. So we always like to start with what was your favorite movie as a child, and has that changed? And what is your favorite movie now?
Okay. Well, I did say Little Shop of Horrors, but I'm also a fan of the classics. So I love Imitation of Life, which is one of my one of my favorite movies. I just think that movie in itself is a brilliantly made movie. It's a coming of age story. It's amazing. I love it. But my favorite movie now, that's a tricky one. Because once again, I go back to the classics because I also am a little bit of a creature of habit. And so I find pleasure in watching things I used to watch. Yeah. So I love like the Five Heartbeats. And I don't know if do you guys know any of Robert Townsend's? Townsend. Yeah, he does a lot of amazing Black movies, you know. And I mean, we can't forget about Robert Townsend. He was definitely one of the people who gave us a lot of Black art. I mean, he created one of our first Black superheroes, you know,
Meteor Man.
Yep, Meteor Man.
Which is a blast. That movie's so fun.
I love that movie.
Totally good. Yeah.
Not to bury the lead, but PJ over here is the head writer for a competitive movie trivia show that does fairly well on YouTube. So he knows a few things about movies. As if the collection of movies behind him that makes it look like he's recording in a Blockbuster video didn't give it away.
I was like, are those like movies or tapes or?
It's all Blu-rays. And it's all movies.
They're Blu-rays?
Mm-hmm.
Stop. I was like, are those records? I was like trying to figure it out. My astigmatism was not giving me a clue.
No. Yeah, it's literally all movies and stuff. So that's literally what I do for a living. And we actually just on Friday we did a Black cinema trivia batch that you should check out. It was so much fun to write because I love Black cinema. I grew up watching a lot of Black cinema, so we're trying to give it a lot more love.
I love it. Do you know the Five Heartbeats?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Oh, it's so good. I'm so happy that first off,
it is good.
Love that, and it's so good. It's like one of my favorites because I mean, my family and I grew up watching that movie a lot.
I mean, I also love BAPS or BAPS, however you want to say it. It's so fun that he did too.
Yes. I mean, I'm gonna get you stuck. Like all of those, you know, like Hollywood Shuffle.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like he's just. I miss Robert Townsend as our voice for cinema. And you know, Michael Wright, I've run into him a couple of times. The one who plays Eddie Kane Jr. in the Five Heartbeats. You know, and that's kind of like, it's really nice to see him. You know, and you know, considering the character that he plays, and you know, we all have a soft spot for Eddie Kane. So I would say that's actually my favorite movie now because it was my favorite movie then.
That's awesome.
That's so awesome.
I probably still love it.
No, it's funny because like my favorite movie of all time has been Back to the Future as long as I can remember. Like ever since I was a kid, I've loved that movie, and I think as I get older, there's something comforting every time I go back to it. It's a warm blanket. That's the best way to describe it.
Yes.
And you're kind of taken. I don't know. I get every time I watch it, I'm transported back to something that feels simpler, and so I understand where you're coming from. Like, the things that we loved when we were younger, you tend to go back to it. Like I was telling Maxwell last night, I watched a couple of movies that there's no reason I should have been watching them other than I liked them when I was younger. And you wanted to go back to a place, and that place is very comforting. And so sometimes it just feels good. I don't know. That's the best way to describe it.
And something about the craft back then too. I'm kind of obsessed with like the way people acted back then. You know, I just recently kind of been, I had seen The Godfather before, but kind of from a distance.
Sure.
In the past, but then seeing it as an adult, I just recently watched part 2. I was blown.
Yes.
No way.
Yes.
Like the acting in that.
Oh my God, they're some of the best.
Not to impugn, I think there are some incredible actors these days, but those guys in the 70s were just doing it differently. Brando, De Niro, Pacino, James Caan, all of these guys are just doing it a little different.
Well,
like you were saying, no offense to the actors today. It's just like there's just something about watching it of how it was then, and it's just a little different. And so sometimes, when I've been asked the question, "What's your favorite movie now?" I'm like, I don't even know. I mean, I have such an appreciation for the arts now, but it's just my love. It goes further back.
Sure.
I'm the same way, and it's. Oh, sorry, Maxwell.
I was just say it's funny. I've been thinking how good the Five Heartbeats could work on stage as a musical.
Yeah. First off, I love that you guys know that movie. Because let me tell you, I literally sometimes you will revoke a black card from somebody if you don't know it. Like, well, people who do that movie, you're like, what is wrong with you?
He worked on it with the Wayans brothers, and I love the Wayans brothers. Yes. So, yeah.
Oh, I'm obsessed. Thank you.
No, of course, and I think you guys are right though, because I'm a huge Robert Altman fan. I grew up watching a lot of Robert Altman stuff, and you look back at his movies like MASH or Nashville or literally any of the stuff he did, and everyone is on a next level when it comes to the performances, and it's the writing and it's the direction, and there's something about that. Like the 70s and the 80s was like the Wild West, if you will, as Hollywood was transforming and becoming like a whole different thing. And so guys like Scorsese and Altman and all of those filmmakers, Townsend, like it didn't matter. Sidney Poitier, and like they were all coming out and doing all these ambitiously different things that no one else was doing. And Spielberg, obviously, like the 70s, he took, and so it's just different. And the performances were different. And that's why when we were talking about Chadwick earlier, his performances feel otherworldly because he was going back to a time when people were doing that type of acting. It's a different thing.
It's so true. And I think that's why I sometimes get stuck with these self-tapes, because I'm trying to figure out who to be. Because there's a certain respect that I have for what it was, and then I know I'm trying to catch up to what it is, and I get really stuck, and then before I know it, I look stoic and I'm serving nothing because I don't really know what I'm supposed to be serving, because I have such a respect for what it used to be. And when I felt like what it used to be is that people were just doing it. Well, there was also a sense of hunger. There was a hunger and a freedom of creativity that people were desperately clinging on to. And I think now, it's interesting. I was just watching the Michael Caine masterclass. I'm trying to do just trying to keep myself sharp. Sure. And even he was mentioning how the celebrities that we know are all obsessed with other celebrities prior to them and taking on of theirs, and so how we're all kind of imitators of each other. And
I think it Clooney and Brad Pitt are very much molding themselves after Paul Newman and Robert Redford.
Similarly, Tom Hanks to Jimmy Stewart.
Yeah, they're all, I gotta believe that they have this, whether conscious or unconscious awareness of the mold that they're fitting in and who they're sort of molding their style and career after.
Yes, absolutely, and I have there's a lot of appreciation for a lot of the artists right now, but I'm just trying to find that avenue where I'm kind of remembering what the classics used to be, and it wasn't so stoic back then.
No,
they weren't so stoic. They were pretty real, actually. Yeah. But we've all kind of gathered this whole technique of not blinking, and it's just it's gotten really crazy.
No, I don't think you're wrong. It's so funny. It's different. It's just different.
Whispering
that's why I've always appreciated Daniel Day-Lewis so much, because he chews the scenery, and yet still manages to make it feel human and authentic. He could go as over the top as possible, but he doesn't lose you.
Yes, and also Bryan Cranston, I think, is really good at that too. He actually the stage into the screen. And the only reason that he does that is because he's so fully committed into the characters that he plays, that they're so fully realized that it's not actually a theatrical production. It's actually playing a character. Yeah. But he can so full, and it's so
which is why he's been so great on stage too. In Network, he was fantastic.
Well, and then Tom Hiddleston's very similar. He's kind of started doing that too, which is why he's gone to Broadway a couple of times to really teach himself. I feel like
Denzel Washington and Viola, same thing.
Yeah, Denzel. Yeah, absolutely. And that's why Denzel did Fences.
Yes.
Because exactly, it's exactly what we're talking about. Yes.
But wasn't he one of the producers for the Ma Rainey as
well?
Yeah,
so his production company currently owns the film rights for all 10 of August Wilson's Pittsburgh plays.
And
he intends to make all of them. I don't think he's going to direct, he directed Fences and was in it, but he is fostering all of these projects.
In the Chadwick thing, of course, came full circle for him.
Right, because
goodness.
Yeah.
We're bringing it full circle. We can actually bring plays into screen. We can do this. And I think we're forgetting that we can. We need to be a little more brave.
I agree.
I'm happy that he's doing that. And the thing is, he's actually not apologizing for it. He's not trying to cut stuff. He's not trying to make things simple for the audience to understand. He's just trusting the text and letting it speak for itself and let the artist just breathe through it. I think what Denzel's doing with August Wilson plays is like exceptional. We need more.
I mean, when you have plays that beautifully written, altering them too much would be a disservice, anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
You don't mess with something that's already great.
Exactly.
PJ,
don't fix it.
Right. I agree. Got a couple more, PJ.
Yeah, as we have like tangented in the best way, and I don't. I love it. But what about TV shows? Like, is there a TV show that you're currently obsessed with?
Yeah. Oh gosh, I go back and forth. Well, currently, I'll say currently because it can be all over the place. Because I mean, I'm trying to find what is the shows that I'm obsessed with. Currently, I can say I'm really curious and blown away by WandaVision.
Yes.
What is going on?
We every Saturday afternoon we host a show on the network where we like break down the episode. Yeah. Our episodes end up being longer than the WandaVision episodes.
They're only 30 minutes.
I know, we talked for like an hour and a half.
Because I'm a huge fan of the comic books and stuff. And
it's so good.
I get obsessed and I go down we have all these theories and stuff because I've been reading comics since I was a kid. You know, and so you're like, this kind of feels like a thing from the thing over here, and maybe it plays in, and yeah.
Well, and the cast is amazing. I mean, Elizabeth and Paul, but Tiona Paris has been blowing me away. She's amazing.
Yes.
It's just, and Catherine Hahn, I cannot.
I mean, that last
episode. I cannot even. I mean, if there's a Catherine Hahn fan club, give me a membership card. I'll put that in my wallet next to some other memberships I'm part of.
I mean, come on. And I have to say, I'm not well versed in the comics, but I do appreciate seeing the Marvel flicks and even the DC comics. But because I still have an appreciation for it, even if I don't really know who these characters are, I'm still very much attracted to them. So, we'll go down the whole, rabbit hole. Like if someone pops up, I'm like, I don't know who Agatha is, but now I'm interested. And then you start reading about her on Wikipedia and you're like, oh my God. She's all these characters and so it's like, I mean, she's got all these powers and things like that. And so I think what is really smart about WandaVision is like, even if you're not a comic enthusiast, you can still kind of follow what is happening. And I'm very happy for that reason.
I have to say Marvel's done a really great job over the last 11, 12 years now doing that. Like with the original Iron Man all the way to WandaVision, like they crafted 23 movies and a TV show that all work in sync with each other.
Yeah.
And no one else is like, it's a next level thing. In my opinion, it's one of the most interesting and ambitious things. Yeah.
They're all different angles and all kind of merging together in a very.
And the best part is WandaVision ends and then there's a week off and then we get Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So it's just going to keep going.
Yeah, and then Loki in May,
and then Loki in June, I think,
or June, whatever it was.
So
the ball keeps rolling, man.
Are there any classic TV shows that you love?
Classics. TV shows. I'm trying to think of things that I kind of come back to. Like a different world. I mean, but that's not like classic. Like
no, that's classic. No, that's fine. No,
it feels very young and fresh to me because they play it on repeat all the time. But you have
but I think that show is almost like 30 years old.
I know.
Well, it's like how Friends is already playing on Nick at Night, and I'm like, we were all children when that started.
Oh my God. Oh, and Martin's another one.
Yeah,
Martin's a great show. I love Martin.
I mean, I even have like the DVD sets and like in living color. Back in the day, you had like the DVDs. Do you have them, PJ?
I don't, and I need to because I love Martin. Like Martin was one of the.
In living color was great too. That's where J-Lo got her start as a fly girl.
Yes,
and Jamie Foxx. Like Jamie Foxx, man.
And
like all of that. I mean,
the weigh-ins and then Jim Carrey is like what's so
Everyone was famous. Everyone.
In
David Allen Greer, all of them.
David Allen Greer is such an incredible performer.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, people always talk SNL, Mad TV, but In Living Color was good stuff.
Definitely.
Like
and
SNL.
My favorite thing too is watching. Sometimes I don't know if it's VH1 or BET, but like late nights they'll show even the Chappelle show on repeat, like just all night long. And I'm like,
yeah.
oh,
The only thing in like the intervening years that came close to In Living Color to me was Key and Peele.
Yeah, agreed.
Yes, I never got a chance to really. I've seen some excerpts in some sketches, but I've never actually seen it in its entirety. So I don't really know their tone still.
It's so fun. If you get a chance, you should check it out. Like, it's bonkers and lovely and wonderful, and that, like, I love them so much. Like, Jordan Peele is just amazing.
We got a Billy Belford in the chat. What's up, Billy?
What's up, Belford? No, but I'm a big Jordan Peele fan. I think the dude is an absolute genius.
Oh, I mean, come on! Like, his movies thus far are just groundbreaking.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Some of the sketches that they do in the show, like before he became a filmmaker, you can see
the DNA of it in a lot of what he did, because they played around with all sorts of genre and like very subversive content, not too quietly hiding underneath the comedy. They were always went for it.
There was a lot of great.
My partner, he just showed me an excerpt from what was the slave auction one.
Yes. Yeah.
Kind of feeling like they're like kind of like haters to people who are being auctioned.
There was some wild sketches in that show. Like, I love sketch comedy because SNL is a thing that I watch all the time, and like.
Yes.
Anytime it's on. And actually, I don't know if you noticed, like, YouTube actually finally, SNL puts their best ofs now on YouTube. Like, they don't release DVDs anymore, but they finally put a Kenan Thompson one on YouTube last week. So there's an hour-long Kenan Thompson one, which was so dope that he finally got one, because Kenan's the longest-running SNL cast member. Like, let's put some fucking respect on that name. Kenan Thompson, who started on all that. All that was the best, and now he is the longest running SNL cast member of all time. And we just put respect on that name, God damn it.
So true.
Do you have any dream roles? You play a musical, anything?
See, okay, well, the hard part about that question sometimes that I get is that I oftentimes like to create characters. And so, and I very rarely take on, I've done it with Spongebob and I've done it with Arachne, but it was only because there weren't many other various women in between who play those roles. So I felt like there was still space for me to kind of find my voice and space in that. So I oftentimes believe that the role that I want to play has not actually been written yet, or it's the character that I just played in Paradise Square, which I still feel like is a developing character named Melly Freeman, that's in this really beautiful production that we just did in Berkeley about the riots that occurred in the 5 Points in the 1800s. And she is a Black woman who's free, who owns a saloon, who is amongst her free Black slave. I mean, well, some are runaways, but some are free Blacks of that time, and and sometimes some of them actually found their freedom, but wasn't necessarily freed. And then also is among the immigrants who are the Irish, and they're all integrate and found harmony and peace, and they're merchants during this time. But then the riots occur, and the whole town is like burned to a crisp. But I just love her strength. And I think most of the characters I play are very close to who I am. So when I say strong, I'm like, well, maybe that's who I am. And I try to bring those things and very vulnerable and sensitive. Easily people who are incredibly resilient, but have areas where they're broken. But that's where the resilience comes from, is because they're broken. And so I oftentimes say that character's not really written yet, because I'm not really sure if I've been inspired by anything else than something that I would want to create from my own DNA.
I think that's a beautiful answer.
Thank you. She's not written yet.
I love that answer. It's the best answer you can honestly have.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
Do you got a couple more, PJ?
Yeah. Let's see. What about your favorite book?
My favorite book? I've been learning how to dive into novels this pandemic, and I'm part of a book club, which has been the most committed thing I've been trying to focus on. And we've read like 6 books thus far, you know, because our meetings are kind of all over the place. And our next book that we're reading is a Cicely Tyson book, which I haven't touched yet. But I would say the book that spoke to me the most, I would say, is this book called Patsy, which is about a Jamaican immigrant who comes to America and by Nicole Dennis. And she comes to America and she tries to find her way. And for me, it's a really beautiful story because as a New Yorker, I remember seeing Jamaican immigrants growing up on the Upper West Side. And there were always nannies to the kids in that neighborhood. And you always were curious about their story. And so I connected to that book because it really is about those women, about that woman who comes from Jamaica, who has dreams and aspirations to be like a nurse, but she has to be a nanny because that's the only job that she has. And she can't really afford her education. She can't really afford a place to live. Her only job and her commitment is to be a nanny to this white family, which she loves and takes such pleasure and respect for. But what we also don't know is that she leaves her child behind in Jamaica. She leaves a whole family, a whole life behind. And so for me, that story was like a really beautiful and beautifully told story by this author. And so for me, that story has stuck with me the most. So I would say it's one of my favorites.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And do you have any favorite musicians or bands?
I mean, gosh, there's so many. That's a hard question for me because I can literally go through a whole list.
Toss a couple out. You know.
I mean, I love Tina Turner. For me, her voice has always been so explosive, and I just love the way it makes me feel. Her voice.
Sure.
You know, we have the Aretha. For me, it's always the classics. It's never really.
That's great.
But you know, I gotta say, I love me some Beyonce. She hits. When you are going through some hard times, especially with like a man, like all you have to do is into your ears and get on a stepper, and she hits. She hits. Like she's so great. She's really fantastic.
She is pretty darn good.
She's pretty fantastic.
Yeah.
She's pro women. She's
yes.
such a feminist. And when you are feeling down and you need to feel how to like embrace your femininity, she is the perfect person for that. I just remember that I'm such a 90s baby and I love listening to like Mary J. Blige and like listening to like, you know, old hip hop, you know, which is like P. Diddy and the Family. Gosh, I mean, there's just so many. I love Green Day. That might sound biased, but you know, the list can really go on. Stevie Wonder. It can go on.
No,
yeah, I find myself going back to 90s hip hop a lot, like The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill.
I mean, Lauryn Hill! She won an award for the all-time best album. Yeah.
That album is unreal.
It's unreal. I have it. I own it. I actually have it. Like the actual CD.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I don't have CDs anymore. I have a bunch of vinyls. I should see if I can get it on vinyl.
Oh, ooh, it's a good idea. It's funny. I just grabbed a bunch of my CDs because my mom was like, "Can you take yours?" And I was like, "Okay." So I have a bunch of my CDs, but I have to do it. I don't want to throw them away because there's some really good stuff in there. There's like Genuine. There's like 112.
Yeah.
Really some good stuff in there. And so I'm thinking about getting those like the CD sleeves, like
the binders,
and just kind of getting rid of the plastic.
Sure.
I don't know what that would be like, unfortunately.
Someone in the chat asking, do you have a favorite Broadway cast album?
Yeah.
Huh. Rent.
Yes.
I think
fair.
It's always going to be consistently great.
Yeah.
You know, no matter what, that original cast album is always going to be consistently great. But you know what I forgot to mention, though? I'm also secretly a big fan of Chicago.
Oh.
All right.
My friends make fun of me because it's like really random. And I have like, I wish I could show you. I wish I had pulled it out. But I have the London album. I have the original cast album from like 1950 something. I have the revival. I have the karaoke. I have the movie version of Chicago. I'm fast.
The music for Chicago is incredible. I mean, Candor and Deb are geniuses. Bob Fosse was a genius.
Yep.
The movie that Rob Marshall put together, I think, is great. The current Broadway show has seen better days.
You know what's funny though? I secretly still want to play Velma Kelly though.
No, I think they're great roles.
Yeah.
I think you'd kill it, and it's fun to go watch because you can get very affordable tickets. But the funny part is, not to go on too much of a tangent, is this production was started at City Center Encores, which is like a stripped down production where you're using binders, and it did so well they brought it to Broadway, and it's just a bandstand on the stage. They're wearing black costumes. There's no set pieces, and it's run for like 25 years.
Yeah, remember
good for them, I guess.
We almost went to see it one of the times I was there. It's
fun to watch. Like I said, the music's incredible, and if the cast is good, it's good. But sometimes, they will put anybody in that show.
But
anybody.
For me, can I tell you, when I was like 16, 17, I used to I would skip school, but only because I was auditioning, right? And I would skip school. And I'm like, well, I have to go to this audition. And what's crazy is that when you are a 16, 17-year-old New Yorker, you think you're 27.
Oh, yeah.
I thought I was very grown. I would
absolutely
sit there in my little kitten heel, what is that? Character shoes, and be there with a little leotard and stand there amongst 40-something-year-old women. I thought that I was overly qualified. And I would stand there, and they would typecast. They would typecast, but it'd be and if they came towards me, it was we didn't understand. We're why is this child here with these
That's awesome.
people? And I would stand there ready to perform.
Hey, you never know. You could still end up in Chicago. I feel like the world could be rubble, and Chicago would still be performing in that theater.
This is probably true.
PLD, what's up, PLD?
I'm dying. It's so true.
Oh, the other joke I make about long-running theater is Wicked is going to be the first show in history where the original production and the revival are running concurrently.
And Phantom.
Well, yeah, but you're gonna have the big lavish Wicked at the Gershwin, and then John Tiffany's gonna do a minimalist production in the small off-Broadway theater, and they're just both gonna exist.
Yeah, I believe that.
Oh my God. Oh, this is podcast after dark.
Yeah, well, it is after midnight, so you never know what's. Speaking of after dark, PJ, I think you have one more question. My favorite question.
Oh my God.
Is that what is your favorite curse word?
Ooh, fuck.
Yes!
There you go.
The most versatile word.
Just
it's
fuck.
so versatile.
Although I've been trying to add sometimes I'll be on Marco Polo and I'll find myself with my girlfriends censoring myself. So I'm this fucker. So I'm saying motherfucker. So
you're not saying the mother part, but you're saying the fucker part? That's funny.
Yeah, I'm fucker. I'm fucker. Right? Because I don't think it's offensive, but it's just because I feel when I say I feel I sound very square when I say it. So I'm because I don't know how to say motherfucker, right? And so I think motherfucker. That's a motherfucker, right?
Mm-hmm.
Usually what I'm doing is this fucker.
There you go.
I have to perfect a little bit, It's all tea.
Well, look, thank you so much for spending all this time with us. You've been an incredible guest, so open.
Thank you so much.
I hope you had a modicum of the amount of fun as we had.
Yes.
Is there anything you want to promote or market? Where can people find you online if they want to follow you on social media?
Oh yeah, I'm at what is my handle?
I don't.
Aren't I a businesswoman?
Yes, very good.
Aren't I a business? Okay, I'm at C Sajous, and that's C at, and then CSAJOUS on Instagram. Christina Sajous on Facebook. And anything to add? Anything that's coming up? I mean, not really much of anything, but any casting directors in there, if you're looking for an actor for a TV show,
you never know who stumbles upon this. You never know.
Tyler Perry.
Thank you to everyone who was watching and engaging in the chat. I'm not going to go through everything else we have coming up. We'll see you tomorrow night. But we will be back in 2 weeks with another episode of Front Center Mez. Our guest will be Andrew Kober, who has done tons of stuff on Broadway. Wonderful guy. Looking forward to talking with him. And stay safe. Wear your masks. And we will see you all.
Wear your fucking masks.
Yes. Because if I see you not wearing one, I will come at you.
Yes.
We're going to have a problem.
We're going to have a real problem.
We have to work.
Yes.
Wear your goddamn mask.
Theater has to reopen. All right. Good night, everybody.
We have to be healthy, of course.
Health is very important, too.
Yes.
Bye, guys.
Good night.
Bye.